Greetings and welcome to our session on supercharging your board for peak performance. It's probably one of my most favorite topics because boards impact our organization in so many ways, including our ability to raise funds to support our mission and that which we do. The phrase, "I cannot believe our board," is probably one that you've heard as well as I have on multiple occasions. If your board is surprising you in all the wrong ways, you will learn today 7 tips to ensure top performance of your board, as well as we'll address the challenges that we face both for boards and our staff and how we can meet those challenges. We'll do all of that in the next 15 minutes, and then we'll move into a networking room where we can have questions and answers, and I look forward to that very much. Before we go into the tips, though, I want to mention very quickly about governing boards, because they are the ones that are responsible for our nonprofits legally. Each state has its own particular laws relating to that. What is important, though, is that we as staff understand what those are legally that our board is required to do by law, as well as then what our expectations are beyond that. And so it's very important in that regard. And so I used to think that the development committee was the most important committee that we had of our board. Yet, in fact, what I've learned is no, it really is the governing board. And we can talk about that later. What I generally hear from colleagues when they talk about their boards, I recognize that it generally falls into the board failed to do this. They should have known better. They didn't do this well. It's all these they should have. And from my perspective, what they don't know and what they don't understand, their responsibilities really resides with us as staff members. So we really need to be clear that our role as staff is to bring that knowledge and that best practices to our boards and helping them play a significant role in developing what I would consider to be constructive relationships. So let's get started. And the first and foremost key is strategic plan. Now, you're going to hear me talk about this a number of times. I just really believe it's critically important. It's a plan that engages all stakeholders in a variety of processes. And it's one that sets the direction for the next 5 to 7 years of your organization. And it's one that it doesn't sit on the shelf. It resides every day in your ongoing implementation, executing, and accountability of your strategic plan. I'm reminded of Alice in Wonderland when she meets the Cheshire Cat, who's sitting in a tree at the fork in the road. And she says, "Which road do I take?" And aptly, the cat says, "Well, where do you want to go?" And she says, "I don't know." And the cat answers, "Then it doesn't really matter." If you have a strategic plan, it matters. The next step, once you've done your strategic plan, is to look at board composition and making certain that the composition of your board reflects the strategic plan and its priorities. Do you have the right people in the right places, bringing the value added that they will bring? Using a characteristic grid, and I apologize for the small print, but I wanted to still use this very quickly. On the left column, we have the different characteristics. So for example, gender and ethnicity, age, primary occupation, what the priorities of our organization, let's list those. And also from, have they served previously in our organization or in other organizations similarly, their community network, and then also their giving. We really want to make sure that we have a broad area of characteristics that we're looking for. They all, though, fit with our strategic plan and what we want to accomplish. Once we've done this, the continuing members, we look at the continuing members. How many are in each of those characteristics? Does the board then want to add, subtract, or stay similar to what they're doing and make any changes that they want? Once we have that information, we have then a profile of characteristics and important talents and stuff that the board wants to seek in its next members. And again, all of this is based on strategic plan. The third tip has to do with attributes, talents, and experiences that we seek. Again, based on the strategic plan and the board characteristics, what are some of the attributes that we want to look at? I think probably the first and foremost one is when we look at the attributes of a leader, do we see these same attributes in the individuals that we're considering? When we look at talent, that really reflects one's aptitude and skills. I really think of this as leading to a person's competencies. And then, of course, there's experiences that they bring to the table as well. And here, an example I want to use is that I joined a board in the past, and out of 11 board members, we had 4 attorneys. Nothing about attorneys to be bad. However, none of the attorneys, 4 of them, had experience in nonprofits or even in the realm of what the mission was. And so I would probably have not had 4, maybe 1, and maybe in nonprofit, or at least in the area in which our organization has its basis. And so we want to look at the members and what they can bring to the table in a very broad way. And again, that skills and assets really helps. And key to this all is, of course, strategy. Now, this is another favorite of mine, is enhancing the value of board members. By this, what we're talking about is what value they bring to the table and to the conversation. And value comes in 4 capital forms. The first is intellectual, meaning we have a certain individuals have a certain mindset that helps them in their thinking, helps them in their decision-making, or it drives that anyway. And so when you think of all of the board members in their intellect, what we really want to make sure of is that we have a very broad mindset, that we have people that are expanding our thinking, our decision-making, and those are the kinds of things that we really want to make sure of. When we talk about people of color or other marginalized individuals, consider the example that rather than cultural fit, we need to talk about cultural add to the table. Another form is reputational, something that is intangible. However, it can really convert to real value as members can influence different individuals and organizations within the community itself. The third form is political value, how members can influence or leverage power in the greater community in which our organization resides. And then finally, social value, basically what networks plural, are people bringing so that we've got the broadest network expanse into the community that we want. One of a quote from a great book that I've read on governance and value, it's called Governance as Leadership, and it's written by 3 faculty members from Harvard School of Education. And I love this and think it's very reflective of what we're talking about. It reads that while trustees act as responsible in terms of fiduciaries, trustees also endeavor to conserve and enhance organizations' tangible assets like finance, facilities, endowment, and personnel. In a strategic mode, remember the word strategic plan, strategic mode, trustees convert those same assets along with intangible, like organizational tradition, ethos, image, all to their advantage for the organization. Value, to be sure, they say, can be denoted in more than currencies other than financial. And that is what I think is critically important for us to remember. The next area strategy is one of cultivating, recruiting, onboarding, and ongoing education of a board. So much like those of us in development, where we cultivate our donors, we also need to think about cultivating our members. So, for example, what is it that we're doing to cultivate? We've got that profile. We know who some of these individuals then would be. We've identified that. How are we cultivating them? Are any of them already perhaps sitting on some of our committees of our board? And so they're gaining experience there. Are we inviting them to our programs so that we can see what their interaction is with individuals, with the people that we serve, if that be the case? We can invite them, have coffee with them along the way so that we really get a chance to cultivate them and try to determine if this is someone that's going to be a culturally add to our board. And so our recruitment process is undertaken. And at that point in time, we really talk about the expectations. We talk about a series of things. We never, ever dismiss any role. We never say, well, give what you can, for example. That is not what we want to do. So the recruiting process is also critically important. And that moves us to then onboarding. Onboarding is orientation can be a part of that, but it's not the only part. And it isn't necessarily a 2-hour orientation session right before the meeting. You get your handbook, you get this, you get that, you get all these things, and you don't even know what you're looking at. So for me, onboarding is a process by which, for example, having done the cultivation, the recruitment, we're teaching members more and more about the board. We're learning from what they know, what we need to know. And we can, for example, assign a buddy, one member of the current board assigned to a new board member. They meet prior to the committee to look at the agenda for the new board member to get some questions answered. They meet after to debrief. And so these two individuals have an ongoing relationship, at least for that first year. And so that they can be better prepared. I'm sure some of you have heard, like that board members will say, I loved my term on the board. The first year I was like, didn't say much of anything. I just sat and listened to learn. The second year I began to think I could do well in different things and help. And the third year I was really meeting my, hitting my pace. Well, we don't really have time to wait 3 years for that, not in our societies today. We have so many things that are critical that we need to be doing and helping to meet our mission, et cetera. And so this onboarding process is really critical so that board members, new ones, by and large, can hit the ground running. And they have some support to do that. Ongoing continuing board development is also really critical. Do we have retreats? Do we have sessions at meetings on particular topics? These are the kinds of things that we talk about in terms of onboarding. And particularly if there's new trends coming, we want to make sure that our board is well aware of that. Board assessments actually is the title, and there's board and self-assessments. And by the way, I just love that little girl. I clearly would want to do an assessment with her. So in assessments, we ask the board members to look at the board as an overall organization and where we see the strengths and the challenges, where we rate different things in the organization. And so each individual thinks then of the board as they complete their survey. The next one, though, is a self-assessment where they think of how they contribute as a board and what they're doing. The governance committee, this is information that they use as they then set about helping address the board in terms of where they want to go. For example, they might get feedback on how you're running a board meeting. There's multiple ways to do it. And there's some ways that are very effective than others. And so this assessment really helps inform the governance committee areas where we can strengthen our board. And then the last tip is on celebration. I don't think we do enough of this, and it's something that's really critical. We have to remember that all of us want to know that we're making the difference in what we do. And so celebration is not the only way to do that by any means, but it is an important part of recognizing individuals' achievements as well as group achievements. So there may be some traditional times to celebrate, the founding of the organization, et cetera. And it also may mean that, for example, a board member has just received a prestigious award, whether it's in our community or in his or her profession. And so for the chair of the board to recognize that, and we can all applaud, thank the board member, let them know how important we know that to be. So celebration is key. For me, effective boards, as we've talked about above, what can make a board effective, it really has to include, though, critical engagement strategies and opportunities for building relationships among the board and others in the organization. I tell the story of, I think that probably, excuse me, the two most effective engagement strategies that I've come to learn. One is when we go on visits, for example, with our donors, taking a board member, having a board member share his or her story about why they're doing what they're doing for the organization, providing that testimonial and engaging with that donor. And people come away from that really inspired. They don't kind of realize that they can do that, but they do come back feeling like they are inspiring others to participate. And then the other one is going to events where, when possible, where those that you're serving, you're able to interact with or see or learn more about. And those two really help boards get very, I see them get very inspired and very engaged. And I think that's really critical. And then, of course, building those relationships. That's where the buddy system, that's where the retreats, a number of different things help contribute, toward that. And then obviously, excuse me, integrity, ethics, and values are some of the non-tangible assets of a board and organization. So for us to ensure success and achievement, we need to follow these 7 steps and see how effective our boards can be. Excuse me. So let's head now to the networking room for a robust conversation and discussion. Thank you.
Oh man,